Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're going to be on for the next hour. If you have a question of Karen, please, by all means, press 00 on your keypad on your phone. 0 if you have a question. We're also collecting email addresses tonight. If you'd like to get on our email list so we can send you updates, by all means, please press 7. That's 7 on the keypad on your phone, 7 for email updates. So it's 0 for questions, and it's 7 for email updates. So I'm going to say this a couple more times while we're getting more neighbors on the call. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'll be handing this call off to Karen in just a minute. We want more neighbors to get on the call. If you do have a question, please press 0 on the keypad on your phone, 0 if you have a question, and press 7 on the keypad on your phone, 7 if you want to provide us your email address so we can send you email updates. One more time. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our telephone town hall meeting. If you have a question, press 0 to get in the queue for that, and 7 on the keypad on your phone if you want to get on the email list. Karen, we have a bunch of neighbors on the line already, so take it away if you would, please.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and I am thrilled with this incredible turnout for tonight's town hall, and I really appreciate each of you for making the time to join in. First, I want to just start by encouraging everyone to continue holding the people of Texas and Louisiana in your thoughts and prayers. As we saw the floodwaters begin to recede in Houston, the situation then worsened along the border between Texas and Louisiana as Hurricane Harvey went out to the Gulf and came back inland. And the rescue efforts are pretty intense, and they are continuing. They are the critical priority. Hopefully you saw that Governor Deal did deploy the Georgia National Guard to assist, so we want to keep our men and women in our prayers as well. I think it's going to be a pretty long and expensive recovery, and again, so I hope you'll do what you can, and they're going to need our continued support and prayers. Let me just also, again, express my gratitude and appreciation to each of you. You were part of giving me an opportunity to serve you as your 6th District Congressman. After being sworn in on June 26th, I went right to work. I got my committee assignments. Those are education and the workforce. My subcommittees on that committee are early childhood and K through 12, as well as workforce protection. My other committee is judiciary, where I am one of, I think, just 2 non-lawyers on that committee, and my subcommittees are Constitution and Civil Justice, along with regulatory reform. So I'm enjoying both of those. Let me take a minute to introduce a couple of people that I hope that for each of you who are in the district you get an opportunity to know. First, Ashely Jenkins. Some of you may know her from her time on the Sandy Springs City Council. She lives over in East Cobb now. She is our district director. Donovan Head, who some of you perhaps met along during his service to Congressman Austin Scott. He's the deputy director here in the district. And we have 2 amazing caseworkers, Emily and Debbie, and they are here in the district office here in Roswell to help assist you with any issues you might have, issues maybe with Medicare, with Medicaid, VA issues, things of that nature. Excuse me. Then in the D.C. office, and we're in the Longworth building in D.C., Muffy Day is my chief of staff, Ashely Dalton, and do note the last names because we have several Ashleys. Ashely Dalton in D.C. handles scheduling and scheduling requests, and then Scott Niddle will be coming on board in mid-September as the legislative director. A real quick update on some issues. Since January, the House has passed over 270 pieces of legislation. They include landmark reform to the VA department, legislation that included a pay raise for our troops, more resources for military readiness, historic regulatory relief that is already saving businesses millions in compliance costs, including the Main Street Relief Act, which replaced the Dodd-Frank. A number of bills to help combat human trafficking, to free up some resources that were not previously open to our local law enforcement to help combat human trafficking, sanctions against hostile regimes, including North Korea, Russia, and Iran. Finally, bills for stronger security and tougher enforcement on immigration. And I'm sure as we get into our Q&A session, hopefully we'll have a chance to go into a little more detail on some of those important issues. Looking ahead, what's on deck for the remainder of the year, Well, first, we're going to have to ensure that we have adequate funding for the relief and rebuild in Texas and Louisiana. So I expect that issue to come up pretty quickly once we go back after Labor Day. Other major legislative initiatives will include clearly appropriations so that we can continue moving forward with the budget process, bills to reauthorize the flood insurance program, along with the Children's Health Insurance Plan that some of you may know as CHIP, higher education reform, additionally tax reform, and hopefully we will be able to revisit the repeal and replace for ACA, because the status quo where we are is not working, and even if we were to throw trillions of more dollars at the ACA, that's not going to fix what is broken. And so what we need is for the Senate to take some type of action so that then that will move us into a Senate-House conference committee where both bodies in a bipartisan way can work towards something, towards a compromise. Then this fall, here in the district, we'll kick off a number of new initiatives. First up is the Service Academy process for high school seniors who are interested in attending one of our nation's military academies and are looking for a congressional nomination. So if you have a high school senior who's interested in that, do be sure to reach out to us. We'll start our regular email updates right after Labor Day. We're also going to do something called Mobile District Office Days, and even in the evenings, where we actually set up the district office. We'll go to DeKalb, we'll go to various places in North Fulton, and then over to East Cobb, and set that up in the evenings and on Saturdays, because certainly I understand that for a lot of people you are limited in being able to interact with the office because you work during the day, and we want to make sure we can have some office hours that are convenient for you as well. And then also we'll do coffees with Karen, and we'll do those on Saturdays as well, so that I can do individual constituent meetings on the weekends, occasionally once a month, maybe twice a month, to be able to, again, just be sure that we are being as accessible to you as we possibly can. So with that, I'll stop, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kurt, and we'll start with the Q&A.
And we have a bunch of questions already in. I'm going to be reading these questions over the air tonight so we can use maximum use of our time to get questions and answers done. By the way, if you do have a question, press 0, but most importantly, we're really trying to build the email list, so please press 7 on the keypad on your phone, 7 if you want to provide us your email list for get on the email list, rather, so Susan can send you out, so Karen can send you out something. Susan's first. And Susan's question goes like this: what is it like with the election? How crazy that was, and what is life like in D.C.? Finally, what have you been doing to help our district? That's Susan's question.
Hi, Susan. Thank you so much for that question. Well, the good news is that post the election, it's safe for everyone to turn their TVs on again. I don't know about y'all, but that was a lot of TV commercials, and I frankly was sick of myself. It has been a whirlwind to make sure that I get integrated into the process on Capitol Hill. I will say that our congressional delegation, from the night of the swearing in, when I was so privileged to have not just Tom Graves, who is the senior Republican in our delegation, but also Congressman John Lewis, do introductions for me to the full House floor. So that was a really humbling and amazing moment. Obviously, getting the team set up, that was most important, because Tom Price, most of his team, and I understand this, they were really great folks, went with him over to HHS. So when I came into the office that first morning, there was literally no one there, and so the delegation, they made sure that we had people there to help us answer the phones, then get my briefings on both of my committees, and work very hard there to understand the procedural aspects within each of those committees and on the House floor. In terms of the district, the most important thing at this point is to make sure that I'm working sort of in parallel, continuing to be in the community when I'm here in the district, and understanding the issues that are important to everyone, like doing these types of town halls, being out talking to citizens, and secondly, making sure that as legislation comes through, that I'm looking at that policy through the filter of what's important to the 6th District.
Our next question comes from Lynn, and Lynn wants to know, what are your plans for tax cuts?
I fully expect that tax reform will be coming up probably in October. Ways and Means Chairman Brady has done a really terrific job of building consensus around a set of principles for tax cuts. He was really gracious and has spent so much time meeting with individual members. He even met with me within my first 2 weeks there to ask about what the 6th District was looking for in terms of tax reform. First and foremost, I think individual relief is incredibly important because middle-class taxpayers, middle-class workers really do need some tax relief. And secondly, lower corporate rates, because the United States has the highest corporate rates in the world, and we need to start to draw those down in order to be more competitive. But what I would be committed to, and what Chairman Brady is committed to, is that corporate relief and individual relief are going to move forward in parallel. And I think that's very important. Permanent repeal of the estate tax, relief for companies to repatriate dollars back overseas to the United States so that those dollars can be invested here in the U.S. And investing dollars here in the United States means innovation, it means R&D, it means jobs, it means increasing wages. And then lastly, simplification of the tax code. There is a sample that they've been passing around that would literally be putting your return for the vast majority of filers on a 5x7 postcard. So that type of simplification, I think, will go a long way. And as we move forward with that type of tax reform, it's going to really further ignite this economy so that we can really move our growth rate from what's been pretty anemic in the 2-3% range up into the 4 or 5% range.
For our neighbors that just got on this call, if you want to get on the email list, please press 7 on the keypad on your phone. We have a few folks standing by to get your email address so you can be added to that list. We're going to take Mark next, and Mark goes like this. What are your plans for communication with your constituents?
So we're going to do, as I said in my opening comments, come at it through a couple of different avenues and mediums, because not everybody likes teleconferences, not everybody likes the in-person, and the fact is there way more people can participate in a tele-town hall than an in-person one, but we'll obviously be doing both. But in addition to that, regular emails will start up. I'm, as I said at the beginning, trying to build the staff has been one of the priority things. So once we get a communications person on board, then we'll move forward with regular emails at least every other week to give short updates for people. These mobile district offices where we can come out across the district in the evening and on the weekends, which, again, for a lot of people, they can't be a part of coming into our office from, 8 in the morning till 6:30, 7 o'clock. They need something after those times or on the weekend. And then I will personally do coffees with Karen so that I can be out as well meeting with constituents on the weekends.
Our next question is from Jim. And by the way, as Karen was saying, if you want to be added to the email list, press 7 on the keypad on your phone. Okay, Jim asks, what can you do with reforming entitlements? What can you do about reforming entitlements?
Well, that's always a very difficult thing. I think first and foremost, I've been a big supporter of block grants for Medicaid because I think our states are better equipped to really determine what is the best way to meet the needs of individuals who are low income, and so I would like to see us do that. We have a lot of work to do in combating fraud through our entitlement program, so it's going to have to be comprehensive. It's not going to be easy, but I think we have to take everything stepwise, and the first thing is to get tax reform through and a budget that balances in 10 years, and as we start to grow that growth rate, it means it changes our revenue equation at the federal government so that then we can start to really understand what we need to do in terms of reforming entitlements in the context of a budget that needs to be balanced.
Our next question is from Nicole. What's your stance on Confederate monuments in Washington, D.C.?
Well, if you're talking about at the Capitol, at the U.S. Capitol, those monuments are selected and determined specifically by the states. Each state is allowed to have 2 monuments at the U.S. Capitol, so that would be up to here between the governor and our legislature for them to determine which statues they want to have there. What I will say is this, Charlottesville was just a really terrible, horrible day, and out of tragedy and evil of that day, I believe came an opportunity for America and Americans to reaffirm that we reject bigotry, racism, and anti-Semitism without equivocation. And I made a speech to a group down in Macon just the Tuesday after Charlottesville, and I wanted to be sure that what I said was without ambiguity. And now I think that what is important is for us to make sure that each of us, whether we are in elected leadership roles or in individual roles, because every day we're leaders in our communities, that we do our part to stand firm against racism, anti-Semitism, and violence in promoting a point of view, and that we do that in our words and our deeds. And 2 things that I think became our focal points for how we can move forward. One, if you look at the TV coverage of the recovery efforts in Houston, that's just brother to brother, sister to sister, neighbor to neighbor, American to American, helping one another through a real tragedy. And that, to me, is the heart and spirit of America. And then earlier this week, having the extraordinary honor of being able to be a part of the ceremony to unveil the new statue in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. at the state capitol, on the grounds of the state capitol, reminding us of not just where we've been, but the extraordinary opportunity of what we can do when we are united going forward.
We have a couple of immigration questions. I'm going to read them both. Harkemos first. Immigration reform. I'm a legal immigrant but have been stuck waiting to get a green card for a few years. There's a bill in the House, H.R. 392. Are you for the bill? What are your views? Can you help the Senate bill, S-281? Now, that's Harkemos' question. Mary Ann, your active participation in the President's goal. I am a first-generation immigrant. How do you feel about the increase in H-2B for workers and the RAISE Act, and how do you feel about birthright citizenship? So it's immigration in general, and I thought I'd kind of blend them together.
Right. So a couple things. I think on immigration we have to move forward in a stepwise way. I do not support birthright citizenship, number one. Number two, I'm not supportive of amnesty. With that said, we have to have enforcement of our immigration laws. The President and the Attorney General have moved forward pretty aggressively in that area, and already we are seeing the results of simply enforcing the laws that are on the books, with a sharp reduction in illegal crossings at the southern border. So that is one step forward. We also, through the House, have passed several pieces of legislation in order to have tougher enforcement actions. One was Kate's Law, which I think some of you will remember, the young woman Kate, who was murdered by an individual who was in the country illegally, had a criminal record, had been deported once and came back. So that law is named after Kate. And then secondly, the No Sanctuary for Criminals Act, which would provide more tools to fight sanctuary policies and punish the rogue cities that want to set up sanctuaries, particularly when you have dangerous criminals. In addition to that, one of the House appropriations bills that has been passed did include the largest increase in funding in more than a decade for border security technologies and infrastructure improvement, including more resources for for ICE and nearly $2 billion for infrastructure, the wall, various other infrastructure items. Then once we get our arms around having enforcement of the current laws on the books, then we will have an opportunity to talk about broader immigration reform. As it regards to the visas, there are several different bills that are moving around. There are competing bills, one in the Senate that would sharply curtail, some in the House that would change the numbers. What I would hope, especially for the H-1B visas related to bringing in individuals for STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math positions, we want to make sure that the workforce needs are met, but we also have an obligation to make sure that our U.S. workforce has the skills and the expertise needed to fill those jobs. And so while, yes, on a short-term interim basis, but let's do our job here at home to grow those skills so that those really high-skilled, frankly high-paying jobs can ultimately go to Americans who are ready to fill those workforce needs.
With that stated, let's do our survey question we have. We have a couple of them, but here goes with the first one. What do you think is the most pressing issue facing the 6th Congressional District in Georgia? If it's jobs and economy, press 1. Traffic, press 2. Opioids, press 3. Immigration, 4. Lowering taxes for individuals, press 5. What's the most important issue? Press 1 for jobs and economy, 2 for traffic. The opioid crisis, press 3. Immigration, 4. Lowering taxes for individuals, press 5. While you're doing that, we're going to take a question that came in earlier today, actually. It's from Aaron. What's the status of Congress getting a balanced budget amendment? That's easy for me to say. Go ahead, Karen.
We actually had a hearing in the Judiciary Committee on that very issue in the middle part of July, and there are about 8 or 9 different balanced budget amendment proposals, bills that are floating around the House. I fully expect that one version or another will go forward, and I think I mentioned up front bringing in a new legislative director, and one of the priorities is going to be looking at each one of those particular bills to really look at what are the differences so that hopefully I can, as a member of Judiciary where the legislation has to come through, take a lead on building some consensus around one of them, because I believe firmly that we need to have a balanced budget amendment, and frankly, even if we don't have a constitutional amendment for a balanced budget, I'm going to be working towards a balanced budget in the House, and I don't see why we shouldn't just hold ourselves accountable to having a balanced budget.
With that stated, let's take another question, and it's going to be there's people that have been asking this in general. Your thoughts on the President's pardon of Joe Arpaio and the way he went about it. That's basically the question of many. Your thoughts?
So I guess what concerns me there is that the court system or the court process had not even had an opportunity to move forward, and the case is still on appeal, and it would seem to me that allowing the process to work before any presidential action was taken, that's just my personal viewpoint about that. I just think that should have been a little more consideration for the court process to go through.
So he was early. Let's take another question from the Kessler family. What will you do to fully repeal Obamacare?
Hello?
My question is...
Hey, you just cut off there for a second.
Sorry about that. I probably missed the mute button. The Kessler family's question is, what will you do to fully repeal Obamacare? Repeal Obamacare.
The House, as probably most people on the call know, did pass its bill to repeal and replace the ACA/Obamacare. The process has stalled on the Senate side with the inability there to pass legislation. We will see what happens when we come back. I can continue and will continue to personally advocate and to use my leverage and coalition building skills to try to further that. I think that with where we are with the exchanges, the process or the exchanges in the system is completely 100% broken. And throwing more money at it is not going to fix what is about to implode. And for me, the most irresponsible thing possible is sitting back and doing nothing, because doing nothing means that people in the 6th District who get their insurance from the exchange, people across our state, people across this country are really going to be affected. And they're affected by the fact that we have fewer choices, which when there are fewer plans, that means fewer doctor choices and less access to care. And that is coupled with spiraling premiums. And already people are being priced out of this. So we have to really take a look at the entire thing and come together for both the House and the Senate, for the Senate to pass something so that we can move to that conference committee that would allow the work to continue. It's my understanding that the Senate could do that. And let me just say that both Senator Perdue and Senator Isaacson were yes votes in the Senate to move the process forward. So hopefully, again, we might be able to see that come back with the Senate, and I fully expect that when open enrollment begins in late October, early November, that this issue will come back to the forefront.
November 1st is that, I believe it opens up, so yeah, it is right about then. Patricia is next, and her question goes like this. Half your constituents are not right-wing Tea Party. How will you represent all of us?
Well, I guess, I'm sorry, tell me the person's name.
Patricia.
Patricia, I think first what I would say is this, that I try to look at people in the district as citizens of the district and refrain from throwing around labels like that. You know, I'm part of an initiative in the House that's a civility initiative, and we need a whole lot less name-calling and labeling and a whole lot more problem-solving and a whole lot more thinking and giving our fellow person the benefit of the doubt. I served as commission chairman of Fulton County. This county is one of the most diverse. The county commission was extremely diverse, both racially and politically, and I was able to work productively there, and I'm going to put the same skills to use in my role in this as your 6th District Congressman to do the very best that I can in looking at the issues based on what is best and right, and I'll let the chips fall where they may on my politics.
Both Jerome and Chris wanted to know your stance about term limits.
I support term limits. There's any number of proposals that are moving forward or that have been proposed in the House and also in the Senate. As you know, it would take a constitutional amendment to make that happen. At the end of the day, you as citizens have the ultimate term limit power in your votes, but I would very much be supportive of term limits moving forward, something along the lines of, maybe instead of 2 years for House members, move to 4 to take out the pressure of running for re-election so quickly on a 2-year cycle, stay at 6 and some sort of staggered, 4-term, something like that.
Let's take another question. By the way, we did clear the queue that takes email accounts. If you'd like to provide us with your email list, please press 7. That's 7 on the keypad on your phone if you want to provide us your email list. And Karen, you said, about every couple of weeks we're going to be sending out emails. Is that the case? That's
correct. We're going to try to get on once we get this comms person on board, every other week cycle, or, more frequently if the issues are moving that quickly.
So press 7 if you want to be added to that list. We'd appreciate it. We're next going to take Bob. Bob's question goes like this. Can you do anything to stop the seniors having to pay the school tax? It's crushing us.
Well, As I am fast approaching the quote senior area, I hear you full stop. That is something that's at the local level that can be taken up with your school board members. I know that and also at the state level, I do believe there was some relief given at the state level across the board on some income taxes. So that's going to be a local issue with your school board members and your county commissions.
Mindy's question is, what are your thoughts regarding the debt ceiling?
So here's where we are with that. So for the first time in 8 years, a budget was actually submitted by the president to Congress. President Trump did that in the timeline that is supposedly required. So that's all a really, really good thing. And now the House is working through the budget process and the related appropriations bills, and there will be 12 appropriations bills. What will happen is the following. So a continuing resolution coupled with the debt ceiling, that involves paying for things that the government is already obligated to pay. I don't believe that from a policymaking standpoint that's a good or appropriate tool to address future spending initiatives and requirements, and I certainly don't like at all the idea of a continuing resolution or increasing the debt ceiling. And with that said, the Republicans, because of just the way the rules work and the votes that are required, especially on the Senate side, we have precious little leverage with the Democrats to be able to make something happen. And I don't think that shutting down the government is productive for anyone. So unfortunately, we're where we are because of the past budget practices or lack thereof. So I think we're probably going to have to do a CR and a debt ceiling increase. However, with that said, we have an opportunity with this budget process for FY18 to get it right, do the right thing, and make some real progress. And, when I say real progress, it's not going to be just saying, as Republicans, it's our way or the highway. It is going to take negotiation. It's going to take building some consensus. And, one thing that, I learned very, very quickly as Fulton County Commission Chairman was that if I wanted to get anything accomplished, I could not let perfect be the enemy of the good. So I think it's important for us to not be absolutely 100% adamant that we have to get a touchdown, and rather work really hard to move the ball forward in an incremental manner. And it's kind of a long answer, but I do want to touch on that budget that we are working on because it is one that will make progress. It would balance the budget within 10 years by cutting spending, reforming government, and growing the economy. By the fiscal year 2027, it will produce a $9 billion surplus, achieving $6.5 trillion in total deficit reduction over 10 years. So that is, a big step forward. And in this group of appropriations bills, there's over $200 billion in total savings over the course of the next 10 years to move us towards that number that we need to get to balance the budget in 10 years.
We did a survey question before, and the question went like this. What do you think is the most pressing issue facing the 6th Congressional District? And so the results were a bit mixed, but here goes. Traffic was 28%. Jobs and economy were 26%. Lowering taxes for individuals was 23%. Immigration 13%. Opioids 10%. Again, 28% was traffic, 26 jobs in the economy, 23 lowering taxes for individuals, 13% immigration, opioids was last at 10. What are your thoughts on those results?
I think it's what the people of the district are feeling about where we are and what we need to accomplish. So I'll take that all to heart. I appreciate that feedback.
Our next question comes from Carl. Carl's question, earlier you had mentioned corporate taxes. Why are you focusing on corporate taxes that can't be compared to other countries around the world? Interesting question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Carl, forgive me, I'm not sure I understand where you're going with that. Part of what we need to do in the United States is have a corporate tax rate. And let me be clear, it's the rate, the actual tax rate, not taking into account various deductions, etc. Regardless, the United States has a tax rate, a corporate tax rate, that puts us at a competitive disadvantage. And so we need to lower that rate to be able to make our companies more competitive. Secondly, though, as I said with the earlier tax reform question, it is important and imperative that individual tax relief go forward in parallel with corporate tax reduction. And that's important on the individual front because for the accountants on the call and the small businesses, if you're organized as an S Corp or an LLC, as you know, you're a pass-through company. And if we only do corporate tax relief, then so many companies will not be able to participate in that relief, and we want to make sure that happens.
Question from Alan. What steps have you taken to stabilize the health insurance industry?
That is actually going to be part of, if we ever can move forward on repealing and replacing ACA, part of what has happened is that when it comes to the insurance industry within the ACA, number one, so many of the subsidies are actually put in place to fill the gap, if you will, on the pricing for insurances between insurance plans for the individual buying the plan with what the actual provider would be paying. So all of that is wrapped up in how we're going to move forward with repealing and replacing ACA.
Second survey question, do you think that there should be a balanced budget requirement for the federal budget? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 you're unsure. The question again, do you think that there should be a balanced budget requirement for the federal budget? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no, 3 you're unsure. Okay, Michael's question, H.R. 25, the fair tax, will you support it?
Yes.
That was easy. Then let me go to Julie's question.
I support making sure that we move forward on tax relief. And if we can achieve it through the fair tax, if we achieve it through what Chairman Brady through Ways and Means is bringing forward, taking a step forward, again, is, I believe, very important for us to do in a governing position. And we are now in a governing mode. And what is most unproductive is continuing to be in the place that, well, that's not my proposal, so I'm not going to support it. So what comes before me, if it makes sense from a tax relief standpoint for the people of the 6th District, for this state and for this country, I'm going to be supportive of that.
If you have a question, and the last minute question, we're going to try and get in many more if we can, press 0, 0, and the keypad on your phone, 0 if you have a question. Julie's question goes like this. What can you do to help law enforcement? You also talk about increasing funding for law enforcement. Can you elaborate on that, please?
What I was referring to, Julie, was that we passed a bill in the House that there is a grant program at the federal level that provides funding to local law enforcement, and it is specifically designated to combat various different crimes in a local community. And it did not include human trafficking. So we expanded that to include human trafficking to give our local law enforcement some additional tools to be able to fight human trafficking, which unfortunately is a very, very serious issue all across Metro Atlanta. And so it's a really good bill, and I hope it will be able to help beef up our efforts in our communities.
We've had I'm going to try and consolidate a couple of questions we've had into just the one. Lots of questions on tax reform. Can you elaborate on the process of the tax reform proposal, please?
Yes. So as I said, we had Chairman Brady, when he came out on tax reform. He spent a lot of time working with members in both the House, the Senate, and the White House to have a consensus around what should happen for tax reform, and where there was an appetite to move forward and some areas where maybe it wasn't going to happen. And that type of pre-work for consensus building, I think, is going to prove very, very beneficial as we move forward later in the fall on that. So, for example, Chairman Brady heard from a lot of people that the border adjustment tax was just not something that was gaining the kind of support that he was hoping to find, and because there were any number of people who seemed to be supportive of that in Washington, but there wasn't the ground support for that. And in fact, in one of our conversations, that was my thinking. Let's not let something as controversial as a border adjustment tax be the poison pill in a broader tax reform initiative that could do such good for families here in the 6th District and across the country, that could really be a growth driver for small businesses and large companies alike. So I think being willing to have those conversations and be flexible towards building consensus is really going to prove dividends as we get into the actual minutia and quote-unquote sausage making of the actual legislation.
That group that's been protesting and with masks at different functions, what's the name of that again? It starts with an A. Antifa? Something like that. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do.
So Keith wants to know what your stance is with them or on them.
Antifa is a hate group, just like the Ku Klux Klan.
That was easy enough. Let me go to, now we're going to go and review the survey question we did before, and it goes like this. Do you think that there should be a balanced budget requirement for the federal budget? 71% yes, 19% no, 11% unsure, 71% yes. Your thoughts?
Wow, that's great. And that kind of support from the ground is really going to be important in being able to move forward a balanced budget amendment. And again, I'm going to be supportive of it, whether we do it as a constitutional amendment or we do it by rule in the House, and that's something that I'm looking into to see if we can't just, again, hold ourselves accountable to that. You have to balance your budget, your companies, your employer has to balance its budget, the state has to balance its budget. So that'll give, I think, some additional impetus to the federal government and to Congress to make sure that we are being responsible and moving towards that balanced budget, and then we work on that debt, and we never allow ourselves again to put this country and future generations into the hole that we've currently created.
Chris's question goes like this. Are you supporting Trump in shutting down the government if taxpayers don't pay for the wall?
I don't think that shutting down the government is a scenario that is a productive one. The House has passed a bill that has close to $2 billion in it for the wall. We have to be good stewards and work productively at governing, and I'm not going to be supportive of shutting down the government.
Last ask, if you want to be added to the email list so we can send you out updates from Washington, D.C. about what's going on there, please press 7 on the keypad on your phone, 7 if you want to be added to the email list. That's 7 on the keypad on your phone. The next question came in earlier today from Ian. You mentioned that one of your committees is the Education and Workforce Committee. Will there be any legislation to address the student loan crisis?
Yes, Ian, I think that there will be. In fact, we had our first meeting just before I came back to the district for the month of August to begin work on higher education reform. And that will be a comprehensive bill looking at any number of issues for higher ed, including the student loan crisis. And there's been any number of potential ways forward there. But I think we'll have to take it in two parts. One, going forward, and then looking at the debt that students right now currently have accumulated. I think one of the things that is going to be helpful is making sure that we have a more simplification of the process and making sure that we are being mindful that we want young people to be able to get the additional education that they need without saddling them with debt that's going to cripple them for a decade or more to come, because that's having spillover implications, whether it be, I think most strikingly, in the housing market where these young people have such debt that they're carrying forward that it's really precluding their efforts from buying homes. And so that's going to be front and center, and we're going to entertain any number of different options, and I'll be working on that very diligently. And we'll make sure that we give you all updates on that as well.
Betty's question is, how can we work with the teachers union to make education more relevant to jobs?
So there are a couple of efforts here from a workforce and education standpoint here at the state level. First of all, the career academies, I think those have been very, very helpful. The dual enrollment between high school and technical colleges and even four-year colleges is giving our young people a real step up. But to be sure, we have some real workforce gaps. In particular, we have them in those STEM areas that I talked about earlier: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The state, through Governor Deal and the Economic Development Department and the university system and the technical colleges, convened an initiative where they really put a lot of effort into identifying where are the workforce gaps in the state of Georgia and how to fill those gaps and how we need to tailor education. And then secondly, making sure that the Hope Scholarship on some of these harder to fill types of jobs that might not necessarily rise to someone's radar screen, whether it be a long-haul truck driver or a welder, to professions that make very, very, very good salaries, to make sure that the Hope Scholarships were available in those arenas as well. So much of that work does happen at the local level with your state school superintendent as well as with your local schools, but those are just some initial thoughts from me on that.
Terry's question is, what kind of qualities do you look for in your staff so we may know the type of people we may be meeting with?
I look for honesty and candor. I want individuals who are compassionate. I want ethical individuals, and I want to hire people who have the skills and the experience to do the job. And it's not so much about politics for me. It never has been. In the Secretary of State's office, I made a very concerted effort to go out to market and really hire into the senior level roles individuals who had the right kind of backgrounds. So the caseworkers are individuals who come out of customer service backgrounds, because that's essentially what this office is: customer service to you, the constituents. You're my customers, you're my constituents, you're the people that we represent.
Frank's question, he'd like to thank you for hosting this telephone town hall. What's your plan on enforcing legal immigration?
I'm sorry, ask that again? You broke up.
Thank you for doing the town hall, and he wants to know what are your plans for enforcing legal immigration. I think he means illegal immigration, but I think that's the gist of it. Okay.
So, and maybe what Frank is getting at is enforcement on the visa side, where so some 40%. And Frank, if this isn't what you were getting at, just send us. Make sure we have your email, or drop us a line, or call us, and I can follow back up with you. In the arena of visas, some 40% of illegals in the country came over on a legal visa and then overstayed their time, skipped out on that visa. And so as immigration reform takes place and as we look at enforcement, that process and being able to reform that process is imperative, so that we are tackling not just illegal border crossings, but also making sure that we are cracking down on individuals who would overstay on those legal visas. Because that, for me, you have to follow the law. That is a basic thing in this country.
Hazel's question is, why are you not a fan of repairing the Affordable Care Act?
The issue with, quote, repairing the Affordable Care Act is the fact that it has so many taxes in it. In fact, the ACA is the single largest tax increase in my lifetime history, the single largest tax increase. And you can't, quote, repair a tax. You have to repeal it. That's the only way to get rid of it. So that's a big part of it. And this thing is so broken that we really do have to sort of look at a clean slate and rebuild it in a more common sense way so that we can make sure that Americans do have access to the health care they need at a cost that they can afford. I would submit that the initial goal of ACA wasn't even the right goal. It's not about whether or not a person has an insurance card. It's about whether or not an individual has access to the care he or she needs when they need it at a price that they can afford. And I say this because think about all the people who were so excited they received an insurance card under the ACA. Now today their premiums are high. They have high deductibles. They go to the emergency room. They don't have the money to pay a high deductible. So what was accomplished? The hospital still had to eat that, or the individual went without care because they didn't have the money to pay their deductible. So we need to rethink the goal. We need to make sure we look at the cost curve on health care so that we can start to get down costs as well.
Our last survey question goes like this. Will the Atlanta Falcons return to the Super Bowl this season? Press 1 for yes and 2 for maybe. Those are your only choices. 1 for yes and 2 for maybe. Will the Atlanta Falcons return to the Super Bowl this season? 1 is yes and 2 is maybe. Okay. We have a question that came in earlier. It's from Diane. Traffic is a mess in Metro Atlanta. Will there be any additional funding for transportation?
Thanks for that question. Yes. So here's what I think will happen with transportation and an infrastructure bill. I don't expect one to come forward until later in the year, but I'm still optimistic that we will get one. With that said, there are so many things that we can do to streamline the process that would free up dollars for local governments. I met today with a mayor and yesterday with county commissioners about this very subject, and we saw what can happen if we can streamline the regulatory process. And really and truly, in talking with these folks, so your mayors and your county commissioners, they're on the front line of actually implementing and executing transportation congestion relief programs. And they say that the number one thing is to get the federal regulatory climate under control. So, for example, one mayor said to me that they looked at a project in their community. If they did it only with local funds, it was going to take less than a year to do the project. If they did it with state funds, it was going to take a year and a half. If they involved federal funds, 56 months. Now, that's just absurd. So I think that we'll be able to at least move forward with some regulatory streamlining, and that in and of itself will give us a little bit of a freeing up of some dollars within the process, and then at the end of the year, first part of next year, look at infrastructure funding.
Gina has a fairly generic question. I think she means something different what she says. She says, what can you do to ensure votes get passed? And I think she means bills get passed. Your thoughts, please.
Gina, I'm not exactly sure I understand what you're asking. The bills, they come through the committee. Once they pass out of committee, they go to the floor. And as I said, in the House, some 270 bills have passed. If what you're asking is how can you follow whether or not a bill has passed or not, you can follow that on the U.S. House of Representatives website and there's a bill tracking element there, component, that you can follow bills there.
You had a lot that you went over in the very beginning, so if you would bring us to the finish line with those thoughts, that'd be great. I wanted to remind everybody, whether we got to your question or not, you can leave us a voicemail at the very end of this call so we can get back to you to answer your question. And so we need your contact information to be able to do that. So stay to the end of the call, tell us your question, your name, email address, phone number, some way we can get back to you. And it'll probably take about a week for every question to circle back with them. So if you would be a little bit patient as well. Karen Handel, bring us to the finish line, please.
First of all, thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to be with us on this call, and most importantly, giving me the benefit of your insights through your questions. And whether or not we got to every single question or not, please know that I will answer every single question. And so do stay on the line and provide that information so that we can make sure I can get back to you. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm here to work with you and work for you, and know that I understand fully that my obligation, my responsibility is to this entire district, and I take that very, very seriously. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.